Hello, this is Tom Worley, Director at OSU South Centers. Stay tuned. We have special guest Dave Brandt with us today. We'll get started in just a few. Welcome to this edition of the South Centers Chat. My name is Tom Worley. I serve as director here at OSU South Centers, and it's great that you're with us today. My special guest today is David Brandt. Dave is a longtime farmer and conservationist and kind of a new term, regenerative agriculture promoter, developer from Fairfield County, the little town of Carroll, Ohio, just up the road from Lancaster. But Dave has been a fixture in the no-till and cover crops development over the years here in Ohio. And we're really looking forward to hearing a little bit about Dave's story. Welcome, Dave.
Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Tom, it's great
Dave,
to be here.
Absolutely. We appreciate your support of our centers here in the soil, water, bioenergy area with Rafiq Islam, that is the program leader, and appreciate you being here today for this. Dave, a good way to start might be to just give a little bit of your early background before you actually got into all that you're doing today. There's always a backstory. And
well, I grew up in Carroll as off of a grandfather's farm. Started in FFA and milked cows early in the lifetime. Did that while I was in high school. After graduation, got married and spent some time in Vietnam with the Marine Corps. Come back home and began farming again. And father was killed on the farm, so that operation was ceased, and was able to go to as a tenant farmer on a 400-acre farm that was owned by Mrs. Robert Southard, and we was really able to start there in '69 with our first no-till fields, and in '71 on that 400 acres we were 100% no-till corn, soybeans, and small grains. From there we just kept growing and learning, and that farm got to be the size of 940 acres with 200 Charolais cows and calves that was finished, and 200 sows fair to finish. I was fortunate enough to have two children, a boy and a girl. The daughter is a year and a half older than my son. When she was in junior high, she started managing the sow herd, so she took care of that, and when Jay was in the 9th grade, he started running the beef herd.
Wow.
Both of those have graduated from college since, and my daughter is a housewife, and my son's a polymer chemist for Sherwin-Williams.
Wow. Wow. Well, your kids followed in your footsteps with those getting involved in animal agriculture in a big way during high school.
Yes.
Dave mentioned to me prior that he actually milked two sets of dairy cattle before school and after school, all the way while he was going through high school. So remarkable work ethic, I think, that he's obviously transferred into his kids. And so especially to know that your daughter took care of the hog operation, that's pretty remarkable.
And she was able to get a full ride at Wilmington State or Wilmington College because of that. So,
in agriculture.
In agriculture.
She studied agriculture,
yes,
over at Wilmington.
Tickled with that.
Absolutely,
and,
absolutely. Well, Dave, you brought us up to the early 70s, I think, when you left the rented farm and were able to purchase a farm of your own, and then got involved in the side of it at the Fairfield County level, the Soil and Water District. You want to talk about those things a little bit?
Yeah, we worked as a tenant for 19 years with the Southards, and was able to accumulate enough funds to buy my grandfather's farm that was right beside the farm we were living on. Mm-hmm. And so I left there and started on an 80-acre farm. Got a position with Soil and Water in '84 and '85 to write the 85 Farm Bill. Mm-hmm. So I walked on most of the farms in Fairfield County to help farmers understand how to implement reduced tillage and start using cover crops and no-till. In the early 80s, then I was hired by NRCS to teach other farmers throughout southern Ohio how to no-till, use chemicals, and look at the use of cover crops.
Wow, wow. Well, definitely, just to even back up just a little bit, we jumped over that pretty fast, but starting on that rented farm in 1969 is when you had your first experience with cover crops.
That's correct.
And
yes.
I would just confess that's the year I graduated high school. And I can definitely remember that that was a very novel, new thing. And the people that tried it, not very far from Carroll, over in Fayette County, where I am from, you know, kind of looked at that as, well, we're just not sure about that. And so you had a lot of skepticism
yes.
in terms of farmers adopting no-till when they've been used to plowing the ground, working the ground, and, you know, getting it all broken up so that you had that good seed-to-soil contact to get germination. And to come in and say you can just stick a seed in the ground and expect a crop, that was a big one to overcome.
And we've done, we've done a lot of work with covers. We actually sell cover crop seed today just because people couldn't find it. I didn't want to get in the seed business, but it was the way we promoted what we did. And I really have learned a lot, and we've now have went from using single species on the fields to multiple species back in the late 90s. In 2000s, we began with multiple species, as many as from 12 to 14, and we found that a lot of the species will actually bring nutrients from the deeper in the soil up if we find the root systems that'll go deep. And we also have learned that legume plants take nitrogen out of the atmosphere, so we have been able to reduce our inputs by as much as 75% on our operation, which now consists of about 750 acres of continuous no-till and cover crops in corn and soybean production.
Yeah, yeah. And do you use a third crop, or is it all corn and soybeans, or is there a cover crop in there? Is there wheat involved in the rotation?
There is a small grain involved in the operation. It's actually a 3-year rotation. It's corn, soybeans with small grains. Used to be a lot of wheat, but since we're in the seed business now, it happens to be rye, barley, triticale. Those are the cereals that we're growing that we can harvest for the seed business.
Right.
We start with a cereal crop, then do our multiple species covers, then go to corn. After corn's harvested, we plant a crop of rye, probably with 1 or 2 brassicas mixed in that to help loosen the soil. And then we plant soybeans, and then from soybeans go back to small grains.
Right.
So it's really a simple rotation. And those are the things that we're trying to instill in producers around Ohio.
Absolutely. Okay, I think you brought some really great photos of cover crops, and the first picture starts out, I think, with your farmstead over in Carroll.
This is a farmstead, and I like to show this picture because this is a December picture, so you can see it's green everywhere we own. All around us is brown, which I call the desert, so we're the oasis among the desert in our area. You know, our local neighbors have not adopted the practices, and we'd sure like to get them involved if we could. You know, then our next picture is going to be a cereal rye that would go to soybeans. With this, we can reduce the erosion by about 75% over the years, so that means we can reduce the amount of nutrients we need to buy just because we're not losing soil. Crimson clover is one of our nitrogen fixing plants that we use. This is a native plant of South Carolina. Supposedly when we started this 9 or 10 years ago, it would not grow in Ohio because they said it wouldn't grow north of the Ohio River, but guess what? It does, does really well, and this plant can capture as much as 100 pounds of atmospheric nitrogen and put it in the root zone.
Makes it available for the corn crop following it.
Right.
Wow, that's pretty valuable property, the 100 pounds of nitrogen.
Yes, sir. This happens to be Daikon oilseed radishes. These do our tillage for us. We started these in '96 when I met Steve Groff out of Pennsylvania. He invented the tillage radish. We plant them with a corn planter just like you would plant a piece of corn. So actually they're spaced about 3.5 or 4 inches apart. In between those rows, we put winter peas. The winter peas draws nitrogen from the atmosphere. The radish picks that nitrogen up, and the tuber gets bigger. So it becomes our storage tanks for nutrients for next year's cover crops, or next year's crops.
But the idea of tillage is that deep penetration through hard pan and compaction.
Yes.
That'll go down 2 to 3 feet at times under great conditions.
Right. So this happened to be one of our happy radishes, as you can see, and you can see how it's lifted the soil. Our radishes, when you plant them in a row, is actually like, I call it my native strip till machine, because I don't have to use diesel fuel, I don't have to use iron, and it actually lifts the soil 3 to 4 inches as it grows. Wow. So it will do tillage. With the cover crops we have, we are able to keep the soil cooler and more moist. So during the heat of the summer, most of our soils never get above 80 degrees. Where in conventional tillage type, like the next picture would be our conventional corn, and you can see it's suffering because of compaction on the surface and how the heat has actually made that ground really hard on the surface.
So what is there, about 5 degrees difference there?
About 5 or 6 degrees difference in those soils. A little bit more than that.
Yeah.
As we look at multiple species, we really like to look at things that'll give us lots of diversity. We like to see grasses, we like to see legumes, we like to see brassicas. So in this picture, you can see about 28,000 pounds of biomass, which means on our farm, we're able to accumulate about 160 pounds of nitrogen in the soil, about 60 pounds of phosphorus comes up from down below, from the deep roots, and about 100 pounds of potash.
Wow.
So we're able to reduce our nutrient load, and with this kind of cover, we have less than 200 pounds of soil leaving per acre.
Wow. Wow.
Will it grow? Here we show you how the corn's coming up through that residue. It's not a problem. It works really well. If you terminate it right with a crop roller, you do not need to use a herbicide. Again, here's peas and radishes precisionally planted, and we plant the corn on a reddish row because that reddish does the tillage.
As you were describing, yeah.
We found by using a soil thermometer and looking at soil moisture that row where that reddish grew, it's about 2 degrees warmer than in between the rows, and it's about 2% drier just because that root has done that tillage part for us.
Wow. Wow.
Again, we like to talk about multiple species. So here we have sunflowers. We put them in the mix about 5 years ago because people were saying, well, that's sure a green mess that Mr. Brandt's got there in the summer. So we put sunflowers in it. Guess what? People love to stop and take pictures of it. But the big beneficial is here, the sunflower is a large taproot. Has a taproot as large as a radish. It goes deep. It will go 4 to 5 foot deep if the soil allows it to. And it also blooms, so it brings beneficial insects. With our beneficial insects, we have not used a fungicide or a herbicide in 9 years.
Wow. Wow. Excellent.
Different species do different things. This happened to be Balanced clover. This is a clover we found that seems to grow fairly well in wet soils. Soils that tend to give up the water in a day or two, but they will still have ponds. And we found out this Balanced clover grows really well in those spots. So we use different things in the mixes to accomplish what we're trying to do to bring diversity and loosen the soils because we do not do tillage. We're looking at crimson clover again, and I really like this. If you have kids and you want to go to farmer's market, you can put 15 of those with a rubber band around them and get $5 for people at the farmer's market.
Oh my goodness.
So there's other ways to help pay for cover crops rather than looking at the nutrients they're going to bring you in the field.
Well, most farmers or country people, rural people would recognize red clover, but this is, and before today, I would have assumed that crimson was just another name for red clover, but they're entirely two different species.
Entirely two different species, and they actually, the red clover has a bulb that is red, and crimson will have a spike like on a steeple of a church.
Yeah, yeah, half inch, 3/4
inch. Some of them are 2 inches long.
Oh, wow.
And they stay really well. They'll stay that way probably about 30 days before they actually turn brown and make seed.
Okay.
So we like to have our cover crops grow to the flower stage, but we do not like for them to make seed. Because if they make seed, then it takes the nutrients from the roots and puts it in the seed pod in the head. So we don't want that to happen. So we have to learn how to time our cover crops so that we get bloom, but no pods or no seed production. Again, just another good summer mix This makes a great mix to graze cattle on. There's sun hemp there. That's a warm season legume. What you're looking at in the center is not a cattail. That's pearl millet. Again, another species that's not supposed to grow east of the Mississippi. But guess what? It does. It's a fine root, deep-rooted grass and does extremely well with no rainfall and heat.
Wow.
So we're trying to build our cover crop mixes to meet the diversity of Mother Nature.
Right, because it can be anything.
Right.
And it varies much from one year to the next. So if you've got all these mixed in the planting, you have a chance of getting accomplishing what you want to.
Yes,
with the
that's
cover
very
crop.
correct. Yes, and we just, we're just trying to. I shouldn't say we're trying to fool Mother Nature, but what we're trying to do is put species in there that have the right kind of growth for the time of year, depending on no matter what the weather is.
Right, right. To complement whatever the season holds, as
That's
we
correct.
all know.
Yes,
We
yes.
had a strange one last year, didn't we?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. So this happens to be sorghum Sudan with other things mixed in it. These are mixes that we describe and tell our farmers to use if they happen to have livestock. Because you imagine, here's September with this growing this tall. So we're having somewhere around 20 ton of biomass here that you can utilize either for livestock or dairy. They could either pasture it. I'd rather see them pasture because then you get the manure from the livestock.
Okay, back.
We talk a lot about mob grazing, and I think mob grazing is a way to handle these crops because as we learn to mob graze, and if we can put a manure pie and a urine pie and a manure pie close together, then we don't have to buy nutrients because the cattle have eaten the green and turned it into the right products we need to grow a crop of corn or beans.
Okay. So mob simply means putting a lot of cattle in a small place.
Area. And you move them quite often.
2 to 3 days even.
Or it may be every hour.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Maybe every hour.
Okay.
Depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. This picture just happens to have more of these species in it with some Sudan sorghum, some buckwheat. What we're trying to do is find cover crops that will release nutrients that's tied up in the soil. If we look at buckwheat for an example, buckwheat can actually release about 12 to 15 pounds of phosphorus in the surface of the soil because it will break down that rock that's not available and make it available to the corn plant or the bean plant. So that's really a plus, We always are looking for new ways and new things to do. So this happens to be grain sorghum. This year we put grain sorghum with a 10-way species. It got taller than our 10-way species, so we were actually able to harvest about 23 bushel of grain sorghum per acre with the green cover crop still growing underneath.
Oh, my. And this was a conventional combine. You went out?
Yeah, well, that was a conventional combine.
Just like you were cutting wheat.
Just like we was cutting wheat.
Yeah.
And grain sorghum or millet or grain sorghum, it feeds just like corn.
Wow. Yeah.
So it makes a good choice, and we still have a cover crop there to protect the soil.
Excellent.
My energy is all spent on learning how to protect the soil to lower erosion, because if we can take producers from 5 ton of soil loss down to 300 to 500 pound, they can reduce the amount of nutrients they have to buy for the soil.
And that might be a good point to talk a little bit further about the organic matter, what direction it goes.
And as we build organic matter, we found if we can produce 24 to 25,000 pounds of organic matter in our year that we have cereal crops, we can add 0.5% organic matter a year to these soils. So we are able to build organic matter much faster than anybody ever imagined we could. I mean, when I talk to university people, no matter where they're at, it doesn't matter. They say you can't hardly build organic matter fast enough. But if you get it in a rotation where you can have a large cover crop that grows for longer than 60 days, you can change the organic matter in the soil.
Wow.
And just imagine.
We certainly used up a lot of organic matter in general, speaking with the crops that we grow here in Ohio.
Just imagine, Tom, if we could gain 0.5% organic matter a year, that means we can hold 13,000 more gallons of water per acre.
Oh, I didn't realize that relationship existed between organic matter and water
holding capacity.
My, that is
So just imagine what 13,000 gallon of water would mean in August when it
right.
don't rain for
in
corn.
in a drought. Yeah.
In a drought.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
also, with a 0.5% organic matter, we can store another 25 to 30 pounds of nitrogen.
Okay.
So just imagine that.
Yes.
At 40 cents a pound, how much that means to a farmer.
Right. Great. Great.
We did the same thing with sunflowers. Sunflowers seem to be a real neat thing because you see them in Kansas and Oklahoma, but you hardly ever see them in Ohio. We had almost a county roadblock with people stopping, taking pictures. They bloom just about time school starts in September, so everybody wants their senior picture taken or their graduation picture or their wedding pictures, and we caught people in wedding gowns and, and tuxedos. We saw one guy put 2 bales of straw in the field to take pictures. You know, it's just been a lot of fun. But when you can grow flowers like this and harvest 32 bushels the acre with a cover crop underneath it, and they're worth about $7 a bushel. So, you know, I'm looking for alternatives other than double crop soybeans that leave the soil bare over the winter.
Very good. Very good.
We are well known throughout the whole world, I think, because this happens to be some students from Beijing, China. The ag professor was there, and he brought these agronomists to learn about how they might adapt some of our practices with cover crop in mainland China, which has been a real experience for us.
I'm sure. Have you got to visit China, David?
No, have not been.
Not yet?
Not yet, no. No.
You've been to France, I know.
I've been to France. And
you met with the Minister of Agriculture.
Minister of Agriculture, and also spoke at the NATO conference on climate change.
Wow, wow.
So that was a humble experience for the farmer from Ohio. I have to tell you that. You know.
Yeah, but such experience, that's the thing. That's the thing. Not many people can claim the 50 years of experience with this process that you have behind you.
And it's been, it's been great. It actually, for me, cover crops has made agriculture fun. It's no longer a drudgery to go to the field and do things because it's trying to figure out what will work the best for the next year's crops.
Right.
And learning which one of these cover crops will bring the most nutrients, loosen the soil the most, create the most organic matter that we can have, and make it stay long enough so we can suppress the weeds that we normally would have to fight with chemical.
Right, right. So there's just a lot of different factors. Almost every facet of crop production can be affected by this use of cover crops, no-till, and then getting the right mix, and then even the opportunity to harvest a portion of the cover. I did not realize you were doing that too.
Well, this is our first year we tried it, so we're learning. You know, we have to learn these curves, and you know, we've not always been successful. We've probably had 3 times more failures than we've had successes, but those failures let you look at the things that's going on and learn. Right, right.
Well, I think as our time begins to wind just a little bit, Dave, but I think we've got several more pictures that you might want to comment on the minutes that we have left.
So this happens to be a really nice cover crop field that we planted into. Everybody says, well, can you do it? Well, here we are. I love these pictures because this is about 42,000 pounds of biomass, and it is just fun to plant.
Does this look like sometime in May?
That would be late May.
Late May.
Yes.
Trees are all out in leaf, and this stuff has grown really prolifically in the spring. Why?
Yeah. This happens to be a field of rye that we're going to beans in. Just to show you, we have a crop roller that's designed by Rodell. And when the rye is like this, it's in senescence, getting ready to bloom, then you can roll it with a crop roller and it will actually terminate itself.
Oh, so no herbicide needed.
No herbicide needed. And this is what it looks like after we've rolled it, and here you can, in the center picture, you can see 1 or 2 corn plants coming up pretty well there, you know. I love this plant. This is called Persilla. This is a plant that tends to have really deep roots, lots of fibrous roots. It's a great thing to bring beneficial insects. In this field, we found 30,000 beneficial insects and only 12 harmful ones.
Wow.
So that's why we've got away from using fungicides and insecticides. This plant will root down 60 to 70 inches deep in a matter of 3 to 4 months.
Imagine that. Imagine that.
And it makes great honey.
I'll bet.
It makes great honey.
Yeah. You keep beehives on your place?
Yes, we do.
All right. All right.
So new things we're trying, we're looking at corn with interseeding cover crops. Here we've got some soybeans interseeded with crimson clover and winter peas. The idea here is to see if we can capture any organic nitrogen that may help the corn. You know. Also, what we can do with this, once you harvest the corn, it gives you green biomass that if you have livestock, you can run in there and probably get 30 to 40 days of pasture out of that.
Okay.
So those are some innovative things that we're looking at.
Interseeded those cover crops, the soybeans and the other, sometime in July?
July, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes. And again, this is the grain sorghum. I just wanted to show you a picture of it while it's maturing. You can see mature buckwheat there. The neat thing about it is we actually harvested grain sorghum and buckwheat, and we cleaned, and we had both buckwheat and...
You got them separated?
Got them separated.
Okay.
So those are some fun things to try, you know. Sometimes people think we're nuts, but it's fun to do these things just to show people how it works. And again, here's our sunflower. You can see the honeybee there. In our field with cover crops, we had 2 hives on 40 acres, which was not a lot of bees, but we still ended up with over 75 pounds of honey from those 2 hives.
Oh my.
You know, and cover crop honey is a lot sweeter than clover honey, I'll tell you.
Now, these sunflowers are oilseed
These
varieties?
are oilseed varieties,
Not
yes.
the ones that people grow in their gardens that are 6 and 8 foot tall?
No, not the gray seed. These are blacks.
Yeah. Okay.
They normally have a seed size head about 3 to 4 inches.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
All right. And they like the oil out of them.
They like the oil out of them,
meal
right.
for
Yeah.
protein source.
So here's a crop roller to just give you an idea of what it looks like. You know, here we're rolling rye, almost too early. You can see a little bit behind the roller sticking up, but in this case it was crimped enough. It actually died in about 30 days. You know.
Now, how soon would you plant after you roll it like that?
We roll after planting every time.
Oh, it's already planted.
It's already planted.
You roll.
Yes, because what we do, if we don't do a good job planting, the roller covers up some of our mistakes.
Okay.
And it works really well.
So it kind of presses the seed a little bit.
Well, it presses the cover down on the seed, so it grows right up, and we don't have trouble.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Get in the stand.
Get in the stand, right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's back to that whole idea of no-till and the question about, well, will it ever come up? And
yeah, right.
How can that be?
Yes, sir. This happened to be a real interesting picture. This is a neighbor that had CRP for 10 years. This was 2 years ago. It came out 2 years ago. I went to the Soil and Water Board in our county and asked if I couldn't have permission to terminate his 10-year CRP 2 months before it come out in October. So they give me permission to do that, and we went in and burnt the existing residue off from his 10 years, planted a 10-way species. This is what grew. There was 5 species that grew in the spring. Ended up that we had about 47,000 pounds of green biomass. We planted a crop of corn, we rolled it, we used no chemical and no fertilizer, and that field averaged 192 the first year out of CRP.
Remarkable.
Our county office always said if you take CRP out and want to grow corn, you need to do tillage. Well, in our areas at 5 to 6% slope, if you do tillage, you've actually lost more soil the first year of tillage than you saved the 10 years
in
of the CRP. So I was trying to show our soil and water and NRCS people that it was a great thing to learn how to do cover crop and no-till with the CRP farms.
Absolutely.
So it's been a real fun experience.
And a lot of CRP land goes into soybeans first.
That's correct, because it's a lot easier to take care of.
Right.
But here we went to corn to show people that we could do that if you change the species, because most CRP fields are 1 or 2 species.
Absolutely.
So we haven't built diversity in the soil.
Yep.
You know.
Dave, we're down to time limit here, and but one term that we talked about earlier that you've adopted, regenerative agriculture. Just comment on that.
Well, I think regenerative means that we're using the soil, we're regenerating the soil, so we don't have to use as much herbicide and chemicals. Anytime we can reduce our input costs, we become more profitable.
Absolutely.
And that's the name of the game.
Absolutely. And it's an older term, but sustainable agriculture, something that is sustainable in the long term for the next generation, your grandkids and forward. Those are the things that you're working toward, even as you make a living from the land now and have succeeded all these years in succeeding in financially and economically with your farm and your seed business and so forth, that it has to work or you wouldn't have stuck with it. I mean, I come from the economic side of things, and you don't keep doing the same old thing if it's losing you money every year. But I think that you have enough background and have proven out over the years that this indeed is profitable and yet good for the soil and good for future generations.
That's correct.
Quite an accomplishment to have all those things rolled into one package, and this whole idea of regenerative agriculture certainly seems to capture all the aspects of that. Well, Dave, it's been great having you with us today. The time has gone very, very quickly, and we appreciate you sharing with our audience the things that you've accomplished over in Fairfield County with no-till as well as the cover crops work and that long-term impact. So till we meet again for South Center's Chat, we'll sign off for now.